So I have an interesting topic to talk about today because I was on a sewing Reddit thread and someone was asking if she got started with sewing, do we think that it's a really expensive hobby, or will she save money, or will it end up being something that she spends a ton of money on? And there was a huge difference of opinion, but most people agreed that sewing can be inexpensive and that it sort of depends on what you're sewing. But a lot of people also said, and this is where I land on this topic, that if it's a hobby and something you enjoy, then it doesn't necessarily need to be cheap, because we all spend money on things that we find valuable. So this is what I'm going to talk about today, and I have some really good tips for you for making sewing cheaper and doing it more frugally so that you can save money and have amazing sewn items in your home. So let's get started. Okay, before I start, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss anything coming up. I still plan to turn that heart quilt block into a pillow next week on my channel, so you don't want to miss that. And be sure and check out my blog, pincutsewstudio.com, for more sewing inspiration and tips and projects. And of course, you can always follow me on Instagram too, where I post everything I'm working on over there at pincutsew. Okay, so my first tip about frugal sewing is to sort of reframe your thinking. I think a lot of people think of sewing as something that makes things cheaper, especially clothes, and that is simply not the case. If you are someone who sews and you've ever been asked to make something for someone and they have thrown a fit at what you want to charge them, then you know that people think sewing is cheap, and it's just not. So I always say that the reason you get something made shouldn't be because you think it's cheap. It should be because you want it to be custom. So if you're getting something that fits you well, that is high quality, that is nice fabric and the style exactly how you want it, that's the benefit of sewing, not because it's cheap. So although I do feel like I save money, especially because I consider my clothing that I make on par with what you would find at a designer store or a boutique, and not just what you would get at, for $5 at a shop. So I do feel like for the quality of my clothes and the style that I like, I'm definitely saving money. But if you're not willing to spend more than $5 or $10 on a piece of clothing, then it's probably cheaper for you to go buy your clothes. I definitely think that sewing is way cheaper as far as home decor sewing goes, because I know you see what pillows and curtains cost at the store, and they are expensive. I don't know why throw pillows have to cost so much money. So when it comes to home dec sewing, even though it's my least favorite genre of sewing, you can definitely save a lot of money making curtains and pillows and like recovering your ottoman, for example. So that is definitely one regard that sewing is cheaper. So if someone wants to get into sewing to save money just on home dec, that would be worth it. But if you want to get into sewing to save money on clothing, it's probably not going to happen, but it's still worth it. But as you know, if you've been reading my blog for any amount of time, I'm a pretty frugal gal. Up until I started my pattern shop last year, we've always been a one-income family. So we also homeschool 3 teenagers who we've always homeschooled. We move every few years, and we've managed to live well on one income. And so these tips are for those of you wanting to sew, but to make it a little bit less expensive and more accessible to you. So my first tip is to utilize the thrift store. This is my favorite way to find fabrics. I have found fabrics at the thrift store for quilts, for clothing, for home decor, for all kinds of things. I always try the thrift store first. I even found a huge bag full of black leotard fabric, and my daughter's a dancer, and so I was able to make her leotards out of that, and that's kind of an unexpected thing to find at the thrift store. I've also found some white denim once I made a skirt out of. I have found lots of linens. I have found vintage cottons. I found flannel sheets. So here's a few ways that I use thrifted items in sewing. Number one, I always buy sheets and things to use as muslins. That means like a practice garment, so that I don't have to cut into my nice fabric. So I always buy sheets for that. I try to buy jersey sheets for stretchy fabrics, and I try to buy flannels or cotton sheets. I avoid microfiber because it doesn't have any stretch at all, and most clothing fabrics will have some give. So recently, last week, I needed more sheets for muslins, so I went and I thrifted a flannel duvet cover. Since it was a duvet, it had 2 sides, so I pretty much got 2 sheets. I think it was $4. and I already made one muslin out of it. I've also thrifted a vintage flannel sheet and made pajama pants out of it, and they're so cute. So I always go, even if you don't find yardage, which a lot of times you will, you sort of have to dig in the thrift store to find it. Some of them keep it bagged up in like sets, and some of them hang them with the other home linens. So look through all of the home linens, and there you'll find fabric yardage maybe, but also look at all the sheets, and also look at the tablecloths and things, and even sometimes the curtains, because curtains can be really useful if you're sewing costumes, because they're those brocade fabrics a lot of times. So always look through all of the home linens sections. You never know what you're gonna find. Even looking through the blankets, you might find sweatshirt fleece. I've made things out of the sweatshirt fleece blankets before, or just nice fleece that's in good condition. One time in the thrift store linen section, I found a really nice piece of rayon crinkle fabric that I made a cute dress out of. I think it cost me $4, and that probably would have been $10 a yard fabric when it was new. So it's always worth looking for fabric yardage and looking through the sheets and things for fabrics. Also, make sure you look for notions at the thrift store. Yard sales is a good place for this too. My thrift store in my last state had like bags of zippers and stuff. I always bought the bags of zippers because I love having plenty on hand. Even if they're vintage zippers work just as well. So you can find things like rickrack, bias tape, all kinds. Usually they're bagged up. You can also find patterns at the thrift store. A lot of times you can find cute vintage ones, and they're usually like $1. Thrift stores don't sell this stuff for very much money. My thrift stores in this state are a little bit less fruitful when it comes to sewing notions, but we're moving again soon. I'm hopeful in my next state there will be even better thrift stores. Another way to use the thrift store is to go through the clothes. This is kind of obvious, but don't just look for clothing in your own size. Look for clothing that's bigger or clothing that's even smaller. Like one time my daughter thrifted a vintage buffalo plaid skirt, and it was this really cute black and white cotton. And when she was done wearing that skirt, I made it into an Ogden cami, and I have worn the heck out of that thing. It's probably one of my most worn self-made garments that I've ever made. I still wear it, and I made it maybe like 3 years ago. I don't know, I wear it all the time. It goes under things. It's great in the summer by itself. It's great. Recently I thrifted a linen skirt. I always look for linen fabric because you can use linen in quilts or craft projects or clothing. So I always buy linen if I see it. This is a plus size skirt, so I actually really like the style of this skirt. It's like a vintage Chico's. Maybe I'll just get it and I'll show you. Here it is. It's this cute periwinkle color. I think I'm just going to try to take this in to fit me. But if it doesn't work out, then I can just use it for the fabric because it's so pretty. I also thrifted a yellow linen tablecloth. It's not a color of yellow that would look good on me, so I'm going to dye it with avocado pits, which dye a pink color. That's so pretty. So hopefully I'll be able to share that with you. I hope it goes well. We'll see. So because thrift stores, most of them no longer let you try things on because of, you know what, I always feel like it's safe to buy something out of linen because even if it doesn't fit me, I can use the fabric for something else. Oh, I have this quilt right here. This is so more than just garment sewing, you can use thrifted fabrics for quilts too, and this was a thrifted sheet I used for the backing. If you've ever had to buy backing fabric for a quilt, it can be expensive, especially if you want it all the same. A lot of times I piece it together to make it cost less, but this I wanted one whole sheet for the backing, and I can't remember what brand this sheet was, but I remember it being expensive and I was excited to have found it. Definitely try to find all cotton when you're looking for sheets. Maybe that's just a preference of mine. I don't really like polyester fabrics. Okay, moving on from the thrift store. As far as shopping for fabric inexpensively, a lot of cities have places like Fabric and Craft Supply sales or shops that are just for resale or like end of bolt things that they sell off really cheap. I've never been lucky enough to live in a city that had one, but you might as well check in your city and see. If you do buy fabric locally, just make sure you get on the mailing list for your local stores or understand how their apps or their coupons work, because if you learn how your local stores sales work, then you can save a lot of money that way. I've actually written a long article on how to shop for fabric at Hobby Lobby, which is a store that I have access to and most Americans do. If you want to play Joanne's coupon games, you can, but I feel like Joann's coupons are harder to use. They've definitely, well, all the stores I think have changed their coupon practices in the last couple of years, but Hobby Lobby, you can get some very good deals on fabric if you understand how the sales work. So I'll link to that blog post below. Obviously, I can only speak for people who live in the US, but if you're someone who lives in Britain or Australia or wherever you live and you want to chime in the comments on tips for shopping at your local stores where you have nationally, then I would love that. Another option is to shop for fabric online. I find really great fabrics from fabric.com, which is an Amazon company, so you can shop the fabric.com website and then find the same fabrics on Amazon to get the prime shipping. I also have a blog post on that, secrets to shopping for fabric on Amazon, because there is a trick to it. You have to type it in a certain way if you're searching on Amazon. So I'll link to that blog post also. But I just got this stack of fabric. Two of these, well, these two came from Joann's clearance. These two came from fabric.com from Amazon. And my next tip is to always buy fabric with your project in mind. This is going to be counterintuitive to some people because I know we all laugh about how big our fabric stashes are, but my next tip is to just beware of keeping a huge fabric stash. I have one large dresser that we turned into a cutting table, and it has big drawers, and all of my patterns and fabrics and many of my other supplies fit into it, and when the drawers are full, it's time to clean it out. I don't let myself buy more fabric than fits in my drawers, because this is what happens. You buy fabric that you just have to have, and then you have this giant stash, but you want to make a new project and you still don't have the right fabric, or you don't have the right amount of fabric, or your fabric has gone out of style because you loved it when you bought it, but then 2 years later you're ready to make something and you don't really even like it that much anymore and it's just been languishing. So you can, I mean, this is just basic financial tips, but only go buy what you need. So if you need a zipper, don't go crazy with the zippers just because they're on sale. Just buy the zipper that you need. You'll spend less and you won't have unused items sitting around your sewing room. This especially applies to fabric. I know that most people can probably make a case for having a large stash of fabric. I guess if you are a quilter, if you're sewing a lot of things like doll clothes, it makes sense to have some things. But even when I shop for doll clothes, fabrics, like I've just been working on a lot of doll clothes patterns. So I've tried to make them all so that they coordinate, so that my fabrics can mix and match with other fabrics. And then I usually, if I'm making a quilt, I just shop my own stash and use scraps. I hardly ever have to buy something. So when I went shopping, I had run through my stash of garment fabrics and I needed some new things, but I picked out my patterns first. I knew I wanted to make a few things for spring and summer. And so then I wasn't just shopping for whatever appealed to me, I was actually seeing what would fit with those patterns. So I ended up getting several rayon lightweight fabrics. This was one of them too. This will appear on my February monthly makes video for sure. Okay, but we can also talk about patterns. This is for the US, of course, only, but again, if you live in Britain or Australia or wherever else you might live, please comment on how you buy patterns and how you try to get it to be less expensive, because I know indie patterns can cost a lot. But here in the US, our patterns go on sale pretty frequently from the big four companies like Simplicity and McCall's. You can get them for a couple of dollars. So I keep a running list in my phone whenever the new pattern releases come out, or if I'm looking for something, I just keep the pattern list so that when they go on sale, I'm already ready with my list. And I also shop for New Look first. So if I want to make something like I need a pair of shorts, I want to make shorts, I shop New Look first because New Look is always on sale at Hobby Lobby. So I can just go get that real quick and not have to wait for a pattern sale. But for indie patterns, you might want to get on those designers' mailing lists so that you can wait for coupons. Etsy is a great place to buy patterns. Obviously, I would say that because I sell patterns on Etsy. But Etsy shops will have a lot of sewing tutorials for just a few dollars each for you to download and print at home. So another tip for garment patterns is to buy a pattern that has many views on it, like this top, for example. Once I got the fit right, I can make this top with 3 different sleeve options, 2 different neck options. I can make the hem curved, I can elasticate the waist, I can make so many different looking tops out of this one pattern. So that's a little way to make your patterns go farther too. Okay, my next tip, changing directions away from thrifting and fabrics, is to learn to alter and adapt and refashion clothing. So a lot of times before I give something away in the Goodwill bag, I see if I can remake it or refashion it. What don't I like about it? And can I fix it? I even go through my girls' giveaways and see if I can make them work for me. So if I'm gonna get rid of a dress or a skirt, but it would make a great Ogden cami, then I just cut it up and make something else. Or if I'm about to get rid of something but it has great buttons, I harvest the buttons off of it first. You can also remake outdated clothes. Like I had a pair of Adidas running pants. They're like fleece lined, so you wouldn't want to run in them. Anyway, they were outdated at the time. Now all this wide leg stuff's coming back, but I turned them into a pair of joggers and I wore them for that whole winter last year. So a lot of times you can even alter your jeans, your pants. You can hem your pants. You can crop your pants if they're already a little bit too short, make them a little bit shorter. You can also think outside of the box when it comes to formal wear or dance wear, anything expensive. One time my daughter needed black leotards for ballet in our last state, and our local dance store was having a big sidewalk sale, and they had the basic plain black leotards for $5. And if you are into dance, you know that leotards cost about $60. So I snatched them all up, and then I remade and adapted them, and I added like a lace cap sleeve to one, and they were so pretty. And so, and then last year my daughter went to homeschool prom, and we had a hard time finding a dress. So we ordered one on Amazon. I think it was $90, and then we turned it into something totally different. It was so cute. I was so proud of that project. We hemmed it so it was T-length. We put a giant bow in the back using the excess fabric. I altered the shoulders and bust to fit her better, and it was so pretty. So, and that saved us a lot of money. If you can learn to alter and remake your clothes, then you can really not only make your wardrobe last longer and go farther, you can save a lot of money that way too. So before you give things away or before you give up on something, see if you can remake it into something else, or just nip and tuck it to fit you better, and that can make a huge difference. So another thing that might help some people, this is my last thing. If you're living on a tight budget, try to restrict yourself to a certain amount of money spent on your sewing hobby every month or every 2 weeks or however often you get paid. I know this seems like, budgeting 101, but if you can just stick to your budget, spend wisely, wait for things and don't buy rashly, and beware of hoarding a huge fabric stash and impulse buying. I guess these tips could apply for literally anything you want to spend money on. But I just think it can be really fun to think creatively about what's already in your sewing room, and if you have the bug to sew something, go through your Goodwill bag and dig out all the cotton scraps and start making a scrap quilt, or get out your mending basket and see what you have in there that you can work on that will scratch your sewing itch without you having to spend a lot of money. I hope this has been helpful. If you have questions or comments, I know that I've missed some good frugal sewing tips, so please share yours in the comments below so we can all enjoy them and read them. And yeah, let me know what you thought of this video, and I will see you soon. Bye.